اليوم فاتح على حسابه حزب الله.
Good afternoon. You're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Linda Tanoon, and these are today's headlines. Future movement leader Saad Hariri is welcomed by enthusiastic crowds in the eastern town of Saad Nail, where he attends Friday prayers. France, Britain, and Germany call on the Syrian opposition to attend peace talks due to be held next week. And warplanes strike a key rebel bastion east of Damascus for the first time since the fragile truce began over the weekend. Future movement leader MP Saad Hariri was welcomed by enthusiastic crowds and fireworks in the eastern town of Saad Nail. After Friday prayers at the Imam Ali Mosque, Hariri said, quote, "We will continue on the path of Rafiq Hariri, who has always called for gathering the Lebanese and had one project, which is to build a state." The former premier reiterated that he is back in Lebanon to stay. He promised to visit the area again, saying Saad Nail and the Bekaa Valley have a special place in his heart. Hariri later headed to Zahle, where he met with Kataib MP Eli Marouni, to whom he emphasized that he shares the same political line with Kataib party leader Sami Jmail. Hariri sat down to speak with CNN about the Tehran embassy attack, Hezbollah, and leadership in Lebanon and the region. He also condemned the ongoing presidential vacuum, indirectly accusing Iran of using Hezbollah to prevent the polls. Here's the interview.
I think the foreign minister of Lebanon, who is close to Hezbollah, took a decision that is not supposed to be taken. I think Lebanon should have stood by Saudi Arabia, because this is something that is not acceptable by all means. Even Iraq, who is very close to Iran, has taken that position, approved the decision in the Arab League. We unfortunately didn't take the right decisions.
So what is it that you believe that the government
I believe
should
that when it comes to Arab unity, we should have a clear decision in the government about that. I mean, Khamenei himself came out and condemned these actions. I don't see why Hezbollah in Lebanon or the foreign minister here took such a position.
What do you think it reveals about
it? Reveals that Hezbollah is being played as a proxy of Iran, and this is unfortunate because Lebanon cannot sustain a policy against any Arab nation, let alone Saudi Arabia. I believe, Saudi Arabia has done so much for Lebanon, and throughout the history, the relationship between the two countries. If you think of how many billions of dollars Saudi Arabia threw in Lebanon, especially after the war in 2006, all of this, Saudi Arabia has been playing a positive, whereas and has never built a militia, and Iran has built a militia called Hezbollah.
This puts you in a particularly difficult situation, doesn't it? Because you lobbied incredibly hard with Riyadh for a number of years in order to raise the billions in military aid for the Lebanese army. Do you concede that the criticism from Saudi that this money is effectively, whether directly or indirectly, ended up funding Hezbollah is...
No, I don't think, I think the Lebanese army has shown throughout the history, even in the civil war, that every single weapon that it owned, it never went outside the army. I think that it's the political decision where Lebanon is being taken by Hezbollah on the region side, and I think this is the main problem that we have.
Saad, quite frankly, the politicians in Lebanon are failing the people, whoever the people support, and you agree with me on that. Why did you some months ago agree to support a pro-Hezbollah presidency?
Because I thought, let's go and mix the cards on the table. Let's turn the table around. Let's say to the people who are opposed to a member of 14th of March to be president, that you want a president they don't want a president from M14. We said, okay, fine, we'll go to 8th of March, we'll choose a president close to that political agenda, and we will go to parliament and we will elect the president. All I wanted to do is to fill a void. For me, better to have a president that I can maybe have some problems with, better than a total void in the presidency.
Is it Iran that holds the keys at present?
I think today we don't have a president because part of the government, or part of the parliament, which is Hezbollah, is not going down to the parliament. We have a problem with the quorum, and Iran can tell Hezbollah, they had elections yesterday, right? Or they had, a few days ago, they had elections. Why can't we have elections like normal people? Why can't we go to the parliament? Why are they stopping Hezbollah from letting members of parliament elect a president?
What happens next if this political vacuum continues?
We're trying to keep Lebanon safe among all the problems that are happening in the region. You see what's happening. We don't want to turn Lebanon into Syria. We want to save Lebanon.
Do you see that as a potential?
I am afraid, it could happen. And there are some people, ISIS would love to come into Lebanon. We're fighting it, and we'll keep on fighting ISIS, we'll keep on fighting Nusra. But, in the end, if you do not have the president, a new government and all that, Lebanon cannot function as it is to face all these challenges.
Lebanon's resigned Justice Minister Ashraf Rifi says he has sent a file to the International Criminal Court to look into the terror case of former Information Minister Michel Smeha. The minister had announced last month his intention to refer the case of Smeha to the ICC, while also calling on the Canadian authorities to get involved. In the document, Rifi accused the regime of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad of barbarically killing and targeting the Lebanese people with explosions to silence it. He said, quote, the Syrian regime didn't hesitate to task its advisor in Lebanon, Michel Smeha, to stage mass killings and murdering civilians and clerics to create a sectarian sedition between the Lebanese and ignite a new civil war. Warplanes have struck a key rebel bastion east of the Syrian capital for the first time since the fragile truce began over the weekend. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says 2 airstrikes hit the edge of the town of Douma in eastern Ghouta, killing 1 person. The strikes were carried out by either Syrian or Russian planes. For the first time in years, hundreds of Syrians nationwide took advantage of a nearly week-long ceasefire to resume anti-government protests under the slogan, "The revolution continues." Demonstrators in opposition-held areas of Aleppo, Damascus, Daraa and Homs have called for the downfall of President Bashar al-Assad's regime. The foreign ministers of France, Britain and Germany have called on the main Syrian opposition to attend inter-Syrian peace talks due to begin next week, but warned that the negotiations would only succeed if humanitarian access was granted and a ceasefire respected. The ministers were meeting as their leaders held a conference call with Russian President Vladimir Putin aimed at putting pressure on Moscow to use its influence on Syrian President Bashar al-Assad ahead of the resumption of talks on March 9 in Geneva.
Regarding our really complicated discussion 3 weeks ago in Munich, there is some progress achieved. And we have now 5-6 days a rather stable ceasefire in Syria, but we all know there are still breaches of the ceasefire, and we have to create transparency about the question who is responsible. But our task is to stabilize, to consolidate the ceasefire and make secure that humanitarian assistance will take place.
And we have encouraged this morning Dr. Hijab, whatever his reservations, to be prepared to return to the discussions in Geneva, to engage in good faith in those discussions. And on our part, we've taken the engagement to press those on the other side, the regime, the Russians, to increase their compliance, to live up to their obligations under this agreement.
Republicans slammed Donald Trump at a U.S. presidential debate in Michigan. That's coming up next. Welcome back. You're watching the English newscast. U.S. Republican presidential frontrunner Donald Trump has come under fire from rivals Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz at a debate as establishment Republicans tried to muster some unity behind a last-ditch anti-Trump effort. The debate began on Thursday night in Detroit, with tension mounting over Trump's ascendancy and his draft to become the presumptive nominee should he win nominating contests in Florida and Ohio on March 15th. At center stage, Trump defended himself from criticism earlier in the day from 2012 Republican nominee Mitt Romney and faced further questions about his record as a businessman at the debate.
I totally disavow the Ku Klux Klan. I totally disavow David Duke. I've been doing it now for 2 weeks. You're probably about the 18th person that's asked me the question. I also happen to call him a lightweight, okay, and I have said that, so I would like to take that back. He's really not that much of a lightweight. And as far as, and I have to say this, he hit my hands. Nobody has ever hit my hands. I've never heard of this one. Look at those hands. Are they small hands? And he referred to my hands. If they're small, something else must be small. I guarantee you there's no problem. I guarantee it.
Right. 2/3 of the people who have cast a vote in a Republican primary or caucus have voted against you. They do not want you to be our nominee. And the reason why is because we are not going to turn over the conservative movement or the party of Lincoln or Reagan, for example, to someone whose positions are not conservative.
Don't worry about it, don't worry about it, little Marco.
Gentlemen, gentlemen.
You ought to chill a bit.
Gentlemen, you got to do better than this.
This guy has the number one.
Mr. Trump, may I ask you, Mr. Trump, I'd like to ask you a policy question. Your proposed tax cut.
That's why the people in Florida do not like him.
We need a commander-in-chief that, number one, will rebuild the military, just like Ronald Reagan did in 1981, coming out of the weak Jimmy Carter administration. He passed tax reform and regulatory reform. The economy took off. It generated millions in high-paying jobs, trillions in new revenue. He rebuilt the military, bankrupted the Soviet Union, and won the Cold War. As president, I will do the exact same thing with radical Islamic terrorism. We will rebuild this military so that it remains the mightiest fighting force on the face of the planet. And then, when I am commander-in-chief, every militant on the face of the earth will understand that if they go and join ISIS, if they wage jihad against the United States of America, they are signing their death warrant.
Luis Inácio Lula da Silva, Brazil's former president, has been detained in the city of São Paulo for questioning amid a sprawling corruption probe centered on the state-owned oil giant Petrobras. Police searched Lula's home and offices linked to him, including the Instituto Lula, his non-profit organization, as well as houses of his family members. Police were acting on a warrant that requires Lula to answer their inquiries as part of an investigation dubbed Operation Car Wash. Officials said a major sweep, including detentions and searches of properties, had taken place in 3 states as police deepened their probe into a vast embezzlement and bribery conspiracies centered on Petrobras. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a quick recap of our top stories. Future movement leader Saad Hariri is welcomed by enthusiastic crowds and fireworks in the eastern town of Saad Nail, where he attends Friday prayers. France, Britain and Germany call on the Syrian opposition to attend peace talks due to be held next week. And warplanes strike a key rebel bastion east of Damascus for the first time since the fragile truce began over the weekend. Those are your headlines from us here at Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim, and I'll see you again tomorrow for more updates.
اليوم فتح على حساب حزب الله